Okay, WKRYS is back on the air. This presentation will be about the corrections of the Gamma assignment, and in addition I'll give you an idea about the crowding out effect. So towards the end, listen carefully, because this crowding out effect explanation will eventually evolve into a homework assignment. All right. In question 1, you're given all sorts of information about an economy. GDP 6,000, savings 1,000, and some of you ask me, is this private savings? Is it total savings, or is it otherwise? Well, it's private savings. SP. Net exports minus 120. All of this is in billions of dollars. The negative 120 means that the economy is undergoing a trade deficit, imports greater than exports. Tax receipts 1,500, transfer payments 700, and the budget deficit is negative $230 billion. All right, so what we're asked to do is to calculate 3 things: government spending, consumption, and investment. There are different ways to approach question 1. All right. If you did it differently, that's fine. I have a particular approach, so let me show it to you. So I have chosen firstly to calculate physical investments right there. So what's my approach here? It's the following. I start with SP, which is equal to, well, there is SP, savings, equal to 1,000. There's SR. SR, you remember, is related to net exports. So here, once again, the government is the economy is experiencing a trade deficit, right? Imports greater than exports by this amount. So the question is, where's the money? Well, the money, since we have a trade deficit, our trading partners, have a trade surplus. So what will they do with these $120 billion? Well, they'll bring it back. They'll bring it back into our financial pool. And I don't want to go over the definitions of financial pool, financial markets, money markets. You should know it by now, all right? So $120 billion escaped, well, allegedly escaped, right, in this trade deficit, but then given the notion of zero runoff, the money came back. These are capital inflows, so they pour into our financial pool. How much? Well, the opposite of negative 120, which is positive 120. And of course we have SG, right? SG. Well, let's see. It's a government budget deficit. Negative $230 billion. So it's the government needs this money, so they're going to be withdrawing this amount of money from the domestic financial pool. So how much will they be withdrawing? They'll be withdrawing negative 230. So what's the total here? 890. And this will be available for physical private investments. Right? Physical investments. 890. Well, again, that's one approach. There are other possibilities. Nextly, I have chosen to calculate government spending, G. All right. So, what did I start here? Well, budget deficit, that's a given, right? Negative 230,000 is equal to T times Y. And what's T times Y? Well, that's a reference to tax receipts, right? And then government outlays. And there are two parts of government outlays here, right? So we have to subtract these government outlays from tax revenues. So we have minus G. That's what we're trying to calculate. And we have minus TR, transfer payments. And we're given transfer payments. There it is, $700 billion. Okay, so let's put these numbers in. The budget deficit is negative 230. Again, that's given. There it is. Tax receipts, or T times Y, that's given. That's 1,500. It's right there. What's not given is the government, and that's what we're solving for, right? And TR, that's given, transfer payments. There they are, $700 billion, negative 700. So we solve for G, and what do we get? We get government spending of 1,300. So that's G. And I think we can safely assume that it's autonomous. Oh, never mind. Doesn't matter. All right, so autonomous government, government spending 1,030. And lastly, we calculate consumption. All right. So I guess the quickest way to do this is to do it this way. Y is equal to C plus I plus G and plus NX. So we're calculating for C, right? That's what we're trying to solve for. So Y minus G minus I, and plus NX. It's plus NX because there's a NX is negative, isn't it? It's negative 1,000. It's negative 120. This economy is undergoing a trade deficit. So when we cross over into the left side of the equation, we have to make NX positive. And all of that is equal to G, right? Excuse me, all of that is equal to, not G, what did I say? All of this is equal to C, consumption. All right, so Y, or GDP, is given to us, 6,000, minus G, we calculated that to be 1,030, minus investment, physical investments, we calculated that to be 890, plus 120 is equal to C. We do the numbers and we get 4,200. So that's the answer for total consumption. For question 2, you were given a whole bunch of numbers, right? Contained in 4 columns. Let's do this in red first, right? This first column, that's SP. The second column, that's physical investments. The third column, well, that's a reference to SG. And the fourth column, well, we can infer from the fourth column SR, right? And these 4 columns, well, they are related by this equation here, SP plus SG plus SR is equal to I, investments. That's total physical investments. All right. Now again, SP can be positive or negative. SG can also be positive or negative, as well as SR. It can also be positive or negative. All right. So let's try the first one there. That's this one here, right? So what do we have? Well, we have an SP of 1,000 that goes inside the financial pool, right? We have physical investments, I, of 1,000. We have net exports of 0. So the implication is that SR is equal to 0. So the question is, what is SG? Well, SG is 0. In this part of the question, we're referencing this here, right? So SP is 1,000. Physical investments are 850. And once again, what is SR given net exports of 0? It's 0. So the question is, what is SG? Well, let's see. This sum of money here, 1,000, that's a reference to private savings. It's the households. They've put this money, they have injected this money into this financial pool. So that's what's available to all of the other actors, right? The firms, the government, and the foreigners. So what amount of money is withdrawn by firms? 850. Foreigners don't get into any withdrawals or injections. So how much is left over for the government? Well, 150, which they need because they have a government budget deficit. So SG would be negative 150. The government, given its government budget deficit, will withdraw this money. So the answer is negative 150. All right, this is the third situation. So what do we start off with? We start off with $1,000 billion in our financial pool. That would be an injection. How much is withdrawn by firms because of their physical investment needs? It's 900. So what's left in the financial pool is $100 billion. The government, as you see, has a balanced budget. So it's neither a government budget deficit nor a government budget surplus. The government does not inject. The government does not withdraw money from the financial pool. There's no need for it. So these $100 billion, they're going to be available for foreigners, should foreigners need this money. Well, let's see now. The implication of this $100 billion is that our economy is experiencing net exports of $100 billion. So what that means is that exports are greater than imports by $100 billion. So our economy is holding on to $100 billion of their monies, right? We have a trade surplus, they have a trade deficit. So what's going to happen? Well, we're going to take this and we'll send it to them, right? In other words, SR is going to be negative 100. But the question is, what are our net exports, right? So what are our net exports? Well, they are 100. This SR equals to negative 100B. That was an extra. That was bonus information. That was bonus analysis. Again, the question is about net exports. So it's 100. That's the answer. Last part. This part here. So what do we have? We have 1,000. Again, that's private savings. How much has been withdrawn by companies for physical investment purposes? 950. And that leaves a 50, right? That leaves a 50 here. All right. So what's our approach? Well, let's see. We have to consider this situation here, right? Net exports are equal to negative 50. So this means that our imports are greater than our exports by 50, right? So what's SR? SR is positive 50, isn't it? Positive 50, all right? So that's going to be injected into our financial pool by foreigners. So that's a plus 50. So that gives us 100. And this is available for the government. So we can safely assume that our government has a budget deficit of $100 billion. Government outlays are higher than tax receipts by $100 billion. All right, that covers it. Question 3. This is the given, and let me give you an explanation. Yeah. What we have to do first is to calculate RG. So what's RG? Well, RG is the recessionary gap. A recessionary gap. That's the difference between potential real GDP and actual real GDP. So potential real GDP minus actual real GDP. All right. So we're told that potential real GDP is 188 point. Whoops. Sorry. 183.33. Check. We're told that actual real GDP is 163.33. So our recessionary gap is $20 billion. All right. Next step. Calculate the change in G. So how do we calculate the change in G, government spending? We take the recessionary gap and we divide it by the government multiplier, the government spending multiplier, which we're given as 1.75. All right. You will later discover that this is the simple fiscal policy multiplier. I'll develop that further. All right. Okay. So we have 20. 20 is the recessionary gap. The multiplier is given 1.75. So the change in government spending is going to be 11.43 billion dollars. Okay. So the question reads, if the government is already spending $40 billion, how much extra demand should the government create to close this recessionary gap? Well, G1 is 40, right? We're told that's 40. The change in G, which we've just calculated, is 11.43. Well, then G2 must be 51.43, right? Again, I might have mentioned this already. I probably did. It's kind of very, very important. What we're looking at here is the essence of the so-called Keynesian revolution, because before Keynes, it was assumed that if the recessionary gap is equal to $20 billion, that the government would have to spend an extra $20 billion to close the recessionary gap, to cure unemployment. Well, the calculations just showed us that given the multiplier or multiplying effect of government spending, the government did not have to spend $20 billion. It had to spend only $11.43 billion. Well, it's a substantially smaller amount of money, and it does matter, doesn't it? All right, I want to look at two things now. One, how do changes in the personal income tax rate change the multiplier, and also how does a change in MPC, the marginal propensity to consume out of disposable income, how does that change the multiplier? All right, let's take the first, and that's a change in T. All right, so let's say there's an increase in T. All right, and what we want to know is what happens to the multiplier. Well, what would the equation of the multiplier, of the government spending multiplier, look like? Again, 1 divided by 1 minus MPC plus MPC times T plus MPI. All right? I'm making assumptions that there's a personal income tax rate in the economy, and also that this is an open economy. In other words, it's engaged in exports and imports, and thus the presence of MPI, the marginal propensity to import, in this model. All right. So let's look at it. If there's an increase in T, well, here is T, right? If T increases, what will happen to the multiplier? Is this one extra dollar generated by government spending, generated by an increase of government demand, when that filters through our economy from level to level to level, is the multiplying process, is it being reinforced, or is it slowing down because of this increase in the personal income tax rate? It's slowing down. Therefore, given an increase in the personal income tax rate, the multiplier, the government spending multiplier, what we're calling the fiscal multiplier, would go down. Now, let me cover the second one in a similar fashion. Let me use green. MPC. Let's say that the marginal propensity to consume out of disposable income goes down. Again, the question is, what happens to the government spending multiplier? Well, again, we would use the same equation, right? 1 divided by all of these denominator numbers. So MPC is here, and it's here. But the strongest effect is right there, isn't it? So if MPC goes up, does that reinforce the multiplier, or does it retard the multiplier? As this extra dollar that has been put into the economy in the form of extra government spending demand, as it goes from level to level to level of the economy, given a higher MPC, given a higher level of consumption, what's happening to the multiplier? Is it going up or down? It's going up. The question is, what is the crowding out effect? Well, it's labeled as a problem. Often, very often, a serious problem. All right, so here's the explanation. The crowding out effect occurs when government spending goes up. When government spending goes up, GDP goes up. When GDP goes up, well, that has an effect on money demand. L goes up. When money demand goes up, the interest rate goes up. When the interest rate goes up, well, this lowers physical investments. And this obviously has a whole set of problems connected with it, right? All right. Now, so it does affect, as you see, physical investments. All right. There's more to it, though. If government spending goes up, GDP goes up, or national income. And that creates an increase in disposable income. And that creates an increase in consumption. And that creates a greater push of national income. And that in turn increases money demand, and that in turn increases interest rates, and that in turn lowers physical investments. Okay. One last aspect here. If there's an increase in G, then then this will increase GDP. That will increase money demand. That will increase the domestic interest rate. And that in turn will cause capital inflows, CI. capital inflows. And what will that do in turn to what will that do in turn to our exchange rate? Our exchange rate is going to go up. And what will that do in turn to our exports? This will bring our exports down. All right. So there are two parts of the crowding out effect. A decrease in physical investments and a decrease in exports. There is a let's see if I should talk about this or should I give you this as a question on the delta assignment? Now let me talk about it. Why not? You see, part of the Greek economic problem, which showed its ugly head fully in 2010, was that the Greek government was spending quite a lot of money. And as the Greek government was spending a lot of money, well, they were pushing up interest rates. You see, they were pushing up interest rates not only in Greece but in the Eurozone, because obviously the Eurozone has a common currency, and that very much scared the pants off of the big boys, the big players inside the Eurozone, the Germans and the French. So what the Germans and the French were afraid of was a lowering of their physical investments, but primarily the fear was over lower exports because of a higher value of the euro. Well, anyway, I tried to apply it to something current. Well, not that current, but something very important. So, how would we show the crowding out effect using our old friends, the goods and services market and the money market? All right, it's been a while, huh? Okay, so aggregate expenditures, GDP, 45-degree helpline. Aggregate expenditures are equal to Y. The AE curve, like that. First equilibrium. Aggregate expenditures 1. National income level Y1. And this would be autonomous aggregate expenditures 1. On the right side, the money market, interest rate, real balances, M over P, M for the nominal money supply, P for the general price level, M over P, the real money supply, and of course L1, L being money demand, equilibrium, equilibrium interest rate and the equilibrium level of real balances. All right, now the crowding out effect. Well, again, how would we show this graphically? Graphically, we would show it as starting in the goods and services market, right? It's a good and services market event. So government spending would be pushed up like that. Aggregate expenditure curve. 2, new equilibrium, new level of autonomous aggregate expenditures, new total aggregate expenditures, and a higher level of GDP. All right? All right, so it starts here. It starts in the goods and services market, and then, of course, it transmits to the money market. And in the money market, what happens? Well, higher level of money demand. So it's a shift of the money demand curve. New equilibrium and a new higher level of the interest rate. All right. Okay. So what happens next? Well, it depends on how we frame our situation. Let's assume that we sort of temporarily, say, okay, let's remove this barrier of short term, right? So what's going to happen? Well, these higher interest rates, they're going to come right back into the goods and services market, and they will obviously affect the physical investors. Right? Higher interest rates, as I've already shown, will lower the borrowing and spending by the firms for expanding, improving, renovating the industrial infrastructure. And it will also affect the exporters, right? Given the higher level of exchange rates, exporters would be hurt by these higher international prices given a higher exchange rate. So exports would decrease. So again, what started in the goods and services market eventually was transmitted to the money market, and then from the money market back to the goods and services market. But again, if we were talking about a more long-term dynamic model, then what just happened in the goods and services market would come right back into the money market. So we would be looking at this from a longer perspective. Okay, so I will end it here, and on the delta assignment, there's going to be something about the crowding out effect. I'm going to require you to do some outside research. Okay.